Good morning, everyone, and warmly welcome to this seminar. Today we have a very interesting 1.5 hour in front of us, and we are really glad to have so many participants into this seminar. We will guide you through. I can't see my presentation. This is the first time we're doing this, so there will be some tricks and some errors. Now, excellent, thank you. So once again, warmly welcome to this seminar. Now let's go back. So today we have three speakers. We will have a very interesting 1.5 hour in front of us. We do have Erik Stiendal from Grønt, punkt, who will guide us through the EU regulations coming up. And I guess a lot of us are very interested in knowing much more about this. And then we have Silvija, who will guide us through how AI, artificial intelligence, and EU regulations can be combined. And finally, we do have Trygve, who will be more, how to say, down to earth and give us some tricks and more practice view of how AI can be used in practice. So before we start up, some info and some practicalities. As I said in the beginning, we have more than 160 participants, which is very fantastic. We are very glad that so many of you will come to this webinar today. We do have a chat box. It's open, so all of you can ask questions, give us rise, give us roast, whatever you want to. And for your information, finally, we will have this webinar recorded, which means that it will be available afterwards for all of you. So before we start up, we will, of course, do some introduction about Smart Retur. I guess all of you, I hope all of you are familiar with Smart Retur. And we are working and we are acting in the reuse business, as you probably know. Our mission and business idea is to make sure that reuse is more profitable than linear and wasteful usage for you and the environment. What does it mean in practice? Well, we are in the load carrier business, and to be honest, the main purpose of what we are doing is actually to prolong the lifetime of all kind of load carriers that we are working with in the entire industry. In order to do so, we have a lot of services, a lot of different products in our portfolio, and I will not go that through in detail, but the common denominator is that we are working very much with a digital solution, which means that all of you can have a very good tracking of all the load carriers that are circulating in the system. Some facts: we are operating in the Nordic countries. We have more than 22 sites across Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. We are aiming to enter Finland next year. All in all, we are 37 employees, and we are more than 235, well, more than that actually, blue-collar workers. We turn over more than 1 million, and we have a reuse rate of more than 98%, which of course is very, very good. So shortly about us. If you have any more questions about this, don't hesitate to contact our local salespeople across the Nordic countries. So let's kick off then and start with the first speaker, and that's Erik Stiendal. Erik, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Erik is the head of government and public affairs at Grønt, punkt. And you are a senior advisor. You are a policymaker in the Norwegian Environmental Agency, and you're also a researcher. So you know a lot about what's coming up now in terms of EU regulations. So please welcome Erik.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And good morning, everybody. So I'm, as said, working for Grønt, also called Grønt Norway, Grønt punkt Norge. I'm looking forward to talk to you next 20 minutes. So let's see if I can control my slides. Starting with the first one. Grønt punkt Norge, we are the leading extended producer responsibility organization in Norway with 5,600 members. And we're a non-profit organization owned by business, and the businesses and business associations are also in our board. So those 7 companies that you see in the upper right are the owners of Grønt punkt Norge. And we also have a collaboration with the Norwegian company Renas on electronics and batteries. So that's a few words about us, and I'll come a bit back to us. I'm dialing in, connecting from Iceland today. It's very early in the morning, and I'm sitting here together with our sister organizations in Sweden and Denmark, Finland and Iceland, and we also have our European umbrella organization, EXPRA. And this collaboration for us, I wanted to start with this because it's very important for us, because the evolution of the regulations in these countries, even though all of us follow EU regulations, it can differ quite a lot. So this dialogue and this sharing of experience is very important, and I think many of you in the audience today to experience these differences in regulatory framework. So it's important that we meet and talk and try to bring improvements, so it's easier to bring packaged goods across the borders. I wanted also to start with just one slide on the Norwegian situation, because we have made some big changes, or we are making some big changes on the Norwegian extended producer responsibility system. And the reason for that is that the Norwegian government saw that once they introduced competition in 2017, 2018, they needed a stronger regulatory framework to manage the EPR schemes. So that's what have been done. And also another issue was that there was a lot of free riders in the Norwegian system. So this is an attempt also to try to get rid of those. And it's not finally adopted yet, but it has just been on public consultation. And we see that coming back to the differences between the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. One difference was that Norway for a long time have had this 1,000 kilo threshold for membership in EPR schemes, but this is suggested to be removed now. Another example is this eco-modulation, that you pay your fee based on how recyclable your packaging is. And I know some countries have started with this, Sweden, Netherlands, and Finland, I believe also, whereas Norway is awaiting to have a common framework in the EU. And EU is also building this framework that are supposed to establish equal rules for all countries. So moving to the big development happening in the packaging world is the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, also abbreviated as the PPWR. And this is a huge regulatory move from former being a directive and now introducing a lot of different regulations. So I'm going to talk mostly about that today. And the current version I have is 330 pages. So, of course, I will only be able to introduce some highlights to you today. But just starting with the background, one of the background was this lack of harmonized regulations across the EU, or maybe I should say harmonized implementation of the regulation. So EU saw that a lot of the packaging was not recycled, and even the recyclable packaging was not recycled well enough. And a lot of countries were not compliant with the existing regulation. And that, of course, combined with packaging as an environmental issue in a linear system, so that made the EU to make this big move and changing the directive to a regulation, which is more binding to or more requiring even more harmonization among countries. So the core aims is to reduce packaging waste and to promote circular economy by introducing reuse and also promoting reuse and more recycling, and also have enhanced the recyclability and set recyclability targets for all packaging. And a main target is to have as high quality as possible on the recycled material, meaning that it's the goal is to have the same quality as virgin material on the recycled material, and that's a big step. So just 2 words also about the timeline, because it's not finally adopted yet. We are expecting that to happen by the end of 2024, early 2025. And I want you to be aware that even when we have this regulation ready by probably early 2025, it still will take quite many years, maybe 6 to 8 years, to develop a lot of secondary legislation and guidance criteria and standards. So this will be a kind of dynamic process that we all need to follow and pay close attention to. And for Norway, again, to the differences between the Nordic countries, in the EU it enters into force right away. And then countries have 18 months to implement it into national law, whereas in Norway it doesn't enter into force until Norway has implemented it into national law, since we are an EEA member. Okay, moving into the nitty-gritty details, and I'm going to bring up some of the highlights that I think is going to affect much of the audience here today. And one of them that is kind of pushing towards reuse, but also pushing towards more recyclable packaging, is the recyclability requirements and design for recycling that the EU introduces now. And it can be said quite simple. Unless you make recyclable packaging with a high recyclability, you will not be allowed to put it on market. And the EU introduces this grading system, so if it's below 70%, you will not be able to put it on market on 2030. And then it makes it more stringent as we go. So it's in 2038, it's only those that are 80% or above in recyclability that will be allowed to put on market. And I've borrowed this figure from Circpac Veolia because I thought it was illustrative and nice. And remember also that this is supposed to be done at large scale from 2035. So this is a big step and will bring in a challenge for many. And so what does it really mean that you have 70% recyclability? Well, the core details we don't know, because this is some of the part of the framework that the EU Commission will develop. But they have given some guidance, some indication of what will be core elements. And one is that the different packaging parts, components must be separated either by consumers or treatment facilities. So it must be easily separated. It must be possible to efficiently sort and recycle it based on the process we have. But they also say, okay, if there are technology ahead in not too far ahead, then this will also be taken into consideration. And then again, the functionality and the quality of the material, the secondary material, should be as good as the virgin material. And I've just added a table here also with some of the issues, or some of the elements that the Commission will look closer at when considering recyclability. Another core element is this requirement that you should use recycled material in plastic packaging. And I've highlighted the point, the requirement that I think is most relevant for the audience, and that's 35% recycled material in your plastic packaging by 2030, increasing to 65% in 2040. And I underline that this is pointing, like the EU wants post-consumer resin, like plastic that has been derived from consumers, not the industrial plastic that is cheaper and easy accessible. So they want this into the circular system. So that's important. There are also quite a lot of different exceptions, so pay attention to those if this is relevant provisions for you. Moving along, we jump into reuse, and again I've borrowed this visualization from Circpac Veolia because I thought it was good, but I need to nuance a couple of things also in this slide. So the reuse targets is mainly covering 3 different categories: beverages, transport packaging, and grouped packaging. And here I'm focusing on what I think is most relevant for the audience, the transport packaging and group packaging. And as you see in the slide, there is a requirement for transport packaging. You need to use 40% of the packaging should be reusable or shall be reusable by 2030. And what this slide doesn't say is that the 2040 goal is not obligatory. It's not hard law. It's something that the actors should endeavor to, but that can change over time. So, but so far, we should focus on the 2030 goal. And okay, this is not so big, some could argue, but then I need to draw your attention to this this exception that is highlighted in the slide, because there are 2 interesting points that are raising quite some concern among some actors, and that is that if you transport packaging within one country, you're actually requested to have 100% reusable packaging. And if you transport between your own companies or affiliated companies within Europe, you're also supposed to have 100% reusable packaging. And there is quite a lot of protests, for instance, in Germany now among the industry associations, because this requirement will be really challenging for many. And we also really don't understand really how this will play out. I would also like to add that concerning specifically plastic wrapping and pallet straps, just before the negotiations in the EU was ended, it was agreed that these might be difficult to use reusable alternatives. So the EU will, as soon as this regulation enters into force, the EU will have a special look at this and consider whether they can be replaced by reusable packaging. So there may change, things may change in when it comes to reuse, but these are the main targets. And then also for group packaging, especially boxes, we're thinking of here, it's a 10% requirement. This was one of the things that was hardest negotiated during the EU negotiations. So it's quite a difficult and complicated regulation. So it's with far more exceptions and details that I've highlighted here. And I'm just also mentioning that in Grønt Norway, we're having a webinar in the 19th of November, specifically on reuse. So I invite you to that. All right. And the role of us, the PROs, the extended producer organizations, today reusable packaging is supposed to be a part of the extended producer organizations. So it's expected to pay fees for that the first time it's put on market, and this will continue under the PPWR. And we are also supposed to have a role in this new reuse system. So I just mentioned that we will also play a role there. And I've collected also a few points that I think might be of interest for some of you. And with time moving quickly, I'll go quite quickly through them. There is this continuation of the regulation when it comes to composite packaging. So if you have packaging that consists of different materials, if it's as long as it's above 5%, you have to report it and pay fees for it. It will be counted. So this is important to take into mind and to account. And then I mentioned the eco-modulation that Norway awaits. Here we will see differences between countries. But the EU is making this framework by 2029, 2030. And then you will be awarded if you have a high recyclable packaging, and you will pay much more if you have a less recyclable packaging. Then also minimization and empty space. All actors are obliged to work towards minimization, but I've extracted one of the key points, which is a requirement to group transport and e-commerce packaging, that you should not have more than a 50% empty space by January 2030. And also we're a harmonized labeling scheme is being introduced, and also making you aware, because many of our members and probably many of those in the audience too are also having contracts with public entities. So this is also being stressed under public procurement, that you have to take your extended producer responsibility. And before I end my last slide, I have also wanted to mention to you this development on a regulation. It's called Deforestation-Free Raw Materials and Products. Some of you are probably aware of it already. Effective from December 30, 2024. It does not have anything to do with the extended producer responsibility, but a lot of our members are paying attention to this, because it's also concerning both wood and cardboard, and requires that that businesses must have good processes to be able to know where the virgin material is originating from. So you have to trace this honestly back to the tree that it came from. And these are introducing quite tough expectations on businesses. Adding that if your packaging is 100% made of recyclable material, it will not be covered. But if it's 50% recycled and 50% virgin, then the 50% virgin, you will need to know where it comes from. Yes. So with this, I think I will go in for landing, and again invite you for our webinar on 19th of November. And thank you to Smartkultur for inviting me. And over to you, Magnus. I cannot, you're muted, so I cannot hear you, sorry.
Well, we are digital. No, thanks a lot, Erik, and thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I think all of us who are in this business, in the logistics industry, we are really concerned about what this tsunami of new EU regulations actually means. But still, it seems like there are lots of uncertainties, what it in practice means for us. And what's your view on this? Why is it like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mentioned this about plastic wraps and pallet straps because it was one of those things that there was a hard lobbying, and the EU Commission actually made some changes. So this is one of the things that will be looked at. So there are definitely like some changes and modifications that can be made, but I think we need to acknowledge that the reuse and the requirements on reuse, they are coming. So all of us need to kind of rearrange and settle in for that. But there might still be some of these details that we need to see how it develops, and still many of the requirements will not enter into force until 2030. So that some few changes will happen. And just adding also that the EU is also acknowledging that, for instance, this introduction of recycled material into plastic recycling, the EU does not have the full overview of its consequences. How will it impact human health, for instance? Or there are a lot of challenges that the EU acknowledges that it needs to take a closer look at. But it's coming, and big changes are happening.
Yeah, for sure. But it seems like, I mean, it would be loads of reporting from each and one company. And what's your view on this? I mean, does that mean that every company in the value chain need to, employ new controllers, new reporting people in order to just fulfill the reporting needs to the authorities? What's your view on this?
Yeah, it's very good that you raised this, because the EU is very clear that this should not be a pro forma thing that companies say that we are using reusable packaging. It has to be documented. It has to be counted. Every trip should be counted. So the EU is coming with requirements that you need a QR code or a digital data carrier, so that all trips can be carried, and that it actually also requires companies to report to the government. And this is something that the PROs, the extended producer organizations like Grønt, punkt, we are doing this today on both reusable and non-reusable packaging. And I think that this will be a role that we might have also in the future, to try to simplify and make it easier for companies to really comply with these new requirements. But really, the reporting scheme that will be introduced, it will be significant.
Yeah. No, we are all aware about that. But then it seems like, this will drive costs in the value chain. And what's your view on this? Will the packaging be more expensive in the future due to this?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, we're experiencing in Norway. We have had the lowest fees on EPR fees for a long time, but we are raising them now because of new regulations. But these, I think we should expect that the packaging may become more expensive, for sure, because of these new requirements. And at least for a while all the technologies, all businesses are adapting, there will be increased cost, but maybe at the level, it will level out at a certain point when we have this kind of built into the systems. I'm not sure. This is not my my main field, but that the requirements will be many, that I know, and that I expect this to become quite expensive for companies.
Which then mean in the end that it's the end consumer that need to pay for this, because I guess all of us need to push the cost forward into the value chain.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. I think all of us we got a touch of what is coming up right now, and thank you very much, Erik, for this. And now let's continue to our next speaker, Silvija Ceres. Welcome. Silvija, you are an experienced and a respected tech entrepreneur, and you are also an investor within the tech sector. And the reason why you are here today is that you have a deep understanding of how new technologies, for instance, AI, can transform industries. So what you will do today, as I understand, you will navigate us through how tech and EU regulations can be combined in some way. So please welcome, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Magnus. So hello, everybody. Perhaps I should come clean immediately. I will not talk very much about EU regulation. I think actually we have too much EU regulation, especially when it comes to AI. So maybe I will talk more about AI and its relation to logistics industry. But the thing is, your industry is converging with so many other things. So this might as well be a talk about AI and the materials industry, or AI and the packaging industry, or I mean, there are so many things converging here. So I want to talk to you a little bit about trends, but more than anything, I want to talk to you about what AI is and isn't, and perhaps the most important point, we need to get real about it. I think we are done. We've had about 2 years talking and being fascinated about AI, playing with ChatGPT, and I think we now need to move on to use it as a tool. And I think a couple of years from now, those who don't use it will be seriously left behind. So that's the sense of urgency we need to have about this topic. So I have forwarded to our wonderful organizers a PDF that I'm hoping they can share with you now in the chat. There is a short cheat sheet of what AI can do for the logistics industry. So if you feel through my presentation that I have talked a little too much about AI and too little about logistics or packaging, then please refer to this cheat sheet with use cases and best practice examples and strategic drivers that explain why is it necessary to get a move, both with enabling technologies, things like drones and sensors and Internet of Things and blockchain for smart contracts, etc., but also with specific AI things for route planning, warehouse optimization, inventory analysis, customer demand prediction, etc. So with that, I want to focus on AI now. And I'll be referring to logistics and the packaging and materials as we go along. So I would like to very, very briefly invite you to think about the moment when Steve Jobs, some 15 years ago, introduced us to a mobile phone with just one button, the first iPhone. I want you to think whether you knew there and then that this thing is going to become your most important tool in your lives. Usually there is one or two people in the audience, that raise their hands and say, yeah, I had to have this. I knew it right away. But most of us were thinking, I'm actually quite happy with my Nokia. I remember I was, really good at pressing the button 3 times to get the right letter. And I remember that I was happy with my Nokia. It had a great antenna, a great battery, a great set of electronic things in it that were actually better than the iPhone, the first iPhone. And I didn't have time to play with Angry Birds, and I really didn't see the point of iPhone. Took a few years before I realized I want my music on this thing as well. It was a really hard decision for me because I paid for my music with LPs, then on tapes, then on CDs, then I scrapped those CDs and put everything on MP3 on my Zen Creative. And now I had to pay once more for my music on Apple Music. But, eventually we went on to Spotify, and it was an accepted business model. Later, we started using our mobile phones for anything from driving and maps to doing our jobs. Right now, I'm clicking through my slides through my mobile phone, tracking our children, everything basically. But my big important point here is that we didn't know that when the technology hit us the first time. We had the same thing with internet. I was in Silicon Valley in 1999, working on Alta Vista, the first full-scale search engine. Google had 16 employees, and we used to laugh at each other because Google did not have a business model in 1999. So I have the exact same feeling with AI now. There's something important happening here. Many of us believe that, but there is no business model at the moment. And so it's very, very tempting to do what we did with internet and what we did with smartphones, and that is to wait and see. Let's wait a little bit on the regulation. Let's wait a little bit on use cases. We think, well, it's not that important. We tried ChatGPT. It wrote a couple of speeches for us, but, it doesn't really change the way I work. So I'll just wait a little bit. And what I really want to impress on you is the fact that we don't have time to wait. This is the first time in human history we have technology where we talk about simultaneity without parity. So the whole world has access to this technology at the same time. If you are not big enough to have Copilot, you have ChatGPT. And if you pay for the paid version of ChatGPT, you have access to the right technology right now. And there is absolutely no excuse for you not to start using ChatGPT for planning of your routes, for planning of your packaging strategy, for understanding the presentation that Erik was giving to us now with summaries written in a way that a 9-year-old can understand them, etc. And when I listen to IT companies and Microsoft talk about AI, they very much talk about things like Copilot and how it will save you 30 minutes per day. Then they say, well, maybe not 30, maybe 35 minutes per day. And that sounds great. But my thing is that it's not going to save you 30 minutes a day. It's going to change the way you work. And my little example to you is I work on course production. Lifelong learning is my passion and hobby. And I used to work with a team of 5-6 people to produce a really good course. It took us a month to do all the writing, the production, the quizzes, the dilemmas, the everything. Now I can do that work alone in 3 days. And this is not 30 minutes saved per day. This is 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, 10 times better sort of production. But you need to know what you want to do and how you want to do it. So it has to be human on top, and the good ones will get better and the bad ones will basically lose out. So the question is, which side of this divide do you want to be? And because things are happening so fast, we don't have 5 years to figure out where to put this in our strategy and budgets. We need to put it in now. So I'm saying it's important, but much smarter people than me are saying it's important and urgent. Stephen Hawking, who's used to think a billion years back to Big Bang, said this might be the biggest thing we've ever done, we humans, but maybe also the last. Bill Gates says he was super excited commercially twice in his life. First time when he realized as a 13-year-old what he could do with PCs. The second time now with AI. It will change everything, according to him as well. And the third guy is Jensen Huang, who is the founder of NVIDIA, this company that produced chips, very useful for graphical user interfaces and graphical cards, because they can do parallel processing. Turns out it's exactly what we need when we do model building in AI. And his company has gone from being, one of the chip companies, mini Intels, to one of the 4 most valuable companies in the world. It's really interesting. The 4 most valuable companies in the world at the moment, they're Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and NVIDIA. And Apple was there for quite some time at the top. Microsoft had its new journey in the last 5 years. Once it started focusing on corporate cloud, and now with Copilot taking the world. Amazon, it took them 30 years to become one of the 4 most valuable companies in the world. NVIDIA, 1 year. So the world is moving very, very fast. And this is not new stuff. From 1956, we've been working on AI. The 10 gentlemen that you can briefly see at the bottom of the group picture, they are some of the biggest names in computer science. There are people like John McCarthy, one of the most important Turing Prize winners and data scientists of all times. And then there is Marvin Minsky next to him, who was the godfather of AI in many ways, most influential person for at least a decade, if not 2. And then there is Claude Shannon, the father of information theory. Without information theory, no information technology. So these are the bigwigs in IT. And they've been working on this since 1956. So it's not new. But something happened with ChatGPT that made us all awake that suddenly things work at a level we didn't expect yet. And the thing is, it's not just generative AI. There are 2 kinds of AI, and both are very valuable and important. So the old style AI that I have touched upon in my PhD 25 years ago is AI based on mathematical logics. We used to ask experts, how do you think to recognize a cancer image, or to understand how this gene is really coded, or how do you think about this meteorological thing, or about this logistical thing? We coded it in a set of rules, and then we ran those rules on a set of data. With this kind of new AI, we start with the data, and then we ask a statistically based algorithm to figure out what are the connections, what are the relations, what are the patterns. And that's the learning bit. So it finds the patterns, we code them in something that vaguely resembles a data structure we have in our brains. So therefore we call it neural networks. And it has several layers of generalizations or optimi. And that's why we have now many, many levels, deep learning. So when we talk about deep learning, until about 5, maybe 7 years ago, the world didn't believe we are going to be able to move beyond 2 levels. Marvin Minsky said it's never going to happen. And now we have many, many, many layers. So this is not something completely new in terms of AI algorithms. What's really, really impressive here is the amount of data we have and the amount of computational power we can put this data through. The important thing here is no AI without data. So if you want to think about use cases where you can do something really, really cool with AI, think about your data and figure out what data do we have, what data can we get that the others might not have, how can we collaborate about data. Data governance, super important point from now on. We've seen AI with breakthroughs in many cases, but we've always thought, well, it's not as cool as our own human intelligence, not really smart. So some, more than 15 years ago, a system from IBM called Deep Blue won over Garry Kasparov in chess. But 3 days later, we said, not cool, because chess is very structured. A few years after that, another system from IBM called Watson won over their world champion in Jeopardy. Here you need to understand natural languages and process things like poetry and humor. We were impressed again for 3 days, and then we said, not cool, because Wikipedia trained. But then, some maybe 5-7 years ago, Two boys from Cambridge built a system based on deep learning that suddenly won over a world champion in a game called Go. And then we all stopped and said, okay, now it works. And together with something called Grand Challenges from DARPA, especially the one about the self-driving car, we started realizing that deep learning and neural networks and generative AI suddenly work, and they work because of data and computing power. So since then, we've been looking back and actually being happy that the things that we thought were complete waste of time are suddenly very useful. So we've been training images for 40 years, trying to teach a computer what's a muffin and what's a chihuahua, or what is a car and what is a bus. Every time you click on these things showing that you're not a robot, you're helping them train a system. I was actually really surprised. My kind of aha moment here was when I saw this new system from these Cambridge boys called DeepMind play a breakout game that we used to play on Ataris ages ago. And they didn't tell the system what the game is about. They just asked it to learn to play the game and play it well, optimize this problem. And the game, figured out eventually, the computer figured out, that it needs to keep the ball going up and down, that it needs to be precise with the ball and break the little things at the top. But then at some point, it learned to make a tunnel on the side. And that tunnel, I have never, ever thought about myself when I was playing this game. And so, I would like to invite you to think about, is it creative or not? Because we keep saying, well, it's not creative and it's not this and it's not that. But actually, it can see patterns we humans can't see. So I think we should stop trying to match the intelligence of AI to human intelligence, because they're very different. Human intelligence is very robust. We can work with very, very little information. And we have values and ethics on top of that. We have this consciousness and the will. AI does what we ask it to do, but it can do things incredibly fast on incredibly large amounts of data. It has analytical powers that we don't have. So it's the combination of the two with a human on top that's really important. Super briefly, since I was given a few minutes more, I want to tell you about the 3 ethical problems that we all worry about in AI, and I want to ask you not to worry about them. I want you to be aware of them, but not worry. I think we worry too much about AI instead of using AI. And I hope you will start using AI and then figure out how to worry about AI, and then maybe help our politicians figure out how to regulate it in a way that doesn't limit our innovation capacity the way it does today. So we talk about 3 things. We talk about bias, hallucination, and lack of transparency in AI. If you remember, I said it's a statistical matching tool. So if a Google asks this statistical matching tool to help them pick out the 10% CVs that they want to invite to a first interview that will succeed most likely in Google, and the system only picks out young men that have gone to MIT and Stanford, and we say AI is very biased. This is not fair. Where are the women? Where are the other people? I want you to think for a second, is it AI that's biased, or is it the data it's trained that's biased? And the data it's trained on is built on past experience, built by biased humans that keep hiring people that look like them, right? So you need to remember that AI looks backwards, and we humans are supposed to look forwards. Don't blame the AI, blame the data. The second problem is hallucination. You ask it for, who's the current Minister of Culture, and it has no idea. But please remember, GPT, generative, pre-trained, transformer. Generative, it makes something new. Pre-trained, it's done training in September 21, even though it was launched in November 22. So it doesn't know about things that happened in the last 2-3 years unless you've actually trained it and told it about them. So it bluffs. It gives you the next most probable answer. It always bluffs, even when it looks like a completely perfect answer, because it's always matching with probabilities and statistics. And transparency, the third problem, is about the fact that people would like to open up the system and check, why did it give me this answer and not that? Why did I get no for my question about, insurance claim? Or why did the car go right, not left? But the thing is, this model with all the relationships that it has gotten from 1 billion data points, at least, many layers, incredibly complex network, many dimensions. It's not built for a human brain to analyze. So accept it's a black box and find ways to test it functionally. Check that it gives you the answers you like. If not, then you have to kind of restrict it from the outside. So there are many interesting examples relevant to logistics. I invite you to look up Boston Dynamics. They are the robot company that has a dog-like robot called Spot and a humanoid-like robot called Atlas, and check a YouTube video called Atlas doing parkour. Atlas is let into a warehouse where it doesn't know the geography. It doesn't know where the boxes are. And it needs to figure out how to run and jump from one to the other. And think about what kind of mechanics, what kind of imaging, what kind of AI you will need to be able to get the robot to learn as fast and work as efficiently. I invite you to read a book called Architects of Intelligence. It's written by a journalist interviewing 23 most relevant people in the world when it comes to AI. And they explain to him their own kind of AI. And there is a lady that runs the MIT robotics lab, and she will then teach you in her interview how she thinks about robotics that makes the warehousing robotics a completely new discipline for you. So there are many interesting things about AI. Please check the spreadsheet or the cheat sheet that was shared with you. There will be also another more extensive PDF shared, not just the presentation, but another kind of logistics-related AI. But I want to spend the last 3 minutes talking about, how do you choose your use case? What do you do when there's so many things you could be doing? And the first thing I want you to be aware of is that we have to stop thinking about trends. We can't look back 3 years and do regression analysis and say that's where it's going the next 3 years, because the world is not a linear system anymore. The world is something we call VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And in this world, you basically have to think scenarios. And these scenarios are based on top of some premises around the world, about the world, and you have to prioritize what's most important in those premises for you. You could be worried about climate crisis, energy crisis, security crisis, many other problems like the interest rates. But first of all, I want you to remember that each of these crises is an opportunity. If you solve the given problem related to this crisis better than your competition, you will be more attractive to your customers. So in each of these crises lies a huge competitive opportunity. The world is driven by relative differences between how we solve problems, both in physics, chemistry, and in business. The second thing I want to say is that I think the most important drivers, the most important premises for your scenarios will be 3 things. A new bipolar world, where we've gone from a world defined by American control or guarantee for a global set of value chains into at least a bipolar world with China and America, probably more. There will also be many more restrictions on resources and value chains, and AI will be the third thing that I think is accelerating everything. And in this world, you need to think fast about strategy. And I use 3 quotes in order to help myself go through these kinds of strategic decisions. The first is related to a guy called Willie Sutton, who used to rob banks some 100 years ago. He was asked, Willie, why do you keep robbing banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. So please reprioritize from some of your old stuff into this new, extremely value creative stuff. And that's where the money is. Strategy is about saying no to 9 things in order to focus on one. That's Willie Sutton for you. Wayne Gretzky was asked, why do you play hockey so well? He said, well, because I'm not where the puck is, I'm where the puck is going to be. That's scenario thinking for you. Dare to think 3 years ahead, and remember, it's going to come very, very fast. And the third rule comes from my old boss in FAST, John Marcus Lerwick. In a time of very, very fast growth and chaos, he used to remind us, guys, please remember, speed is no replacement for direction. Choose your use case, that's your direction. Reprioritize resources from some of the old stuff with less MVP into this new stuff. And please remember, the future is coming extremely fast at you. Good luck, and thank you for listening. Magnus, over to you. And you are on mute.
Thanks a lot, Silvija. Wow, I think your presentation starts up a lot of processes for all of us in our small minds. And it's for sure that this will be a game changer. I think one question we raised or we got in here was actually, will this change the job situations for ordinary people? Will AI take over standard jobs in the industry? And what's your take on this?
So AI will not take over standard jobs, but a person using AI will take your job if you don't. You don't have to. You can say, I'm very happy with the way things work. But please remember that, for example, when Excel came, there were some accountants that said, no, I like to do things on pen and paper. And we said, well, no more job for accountants. We can all do this ourselves. Turns out that we didn't stop using accountants. There's more job for them than ever, but the accountants have now a much more complex job because of all the new compliance, because all the new tax laws, because of all the new stuff like the EU, whatever, packaging and everything else. So every job will become more complex, and I think that it will be changed in the short term on being faster on what you do today. In the long term, you will be doing new things. So it's doing things right and doing the right things.
So we will not worry then.
No.
That's your point. The content of the job will be different in the future. Yes.
You have to challenge yourself to think about, what's the real value creation in my job? How do I create value? And the task will be the same, but it will be solved in new ways.
One other question that was raised is the privacy, the data privacy. I mean, you talked about that AI is dependent upon big data, a lot of data points, and the data is also a personal thing. So how will AI secure that the privacy in the future will be held, like the GDPR, for instance, and other privacy regulations?
So I like to provoke a little bit about data, because I honestly believe that our politicians and often our leaders as well are hiding behind GDPR and other kinds of data regulation when they don't know what to do with digitalization. And I think our healthcare system is a very good example of this, in Norway at least. So two things we need to do. We need to understand that GDPR doesn't say don't use data. GDPR says respect data and use it in ways that you have agreed with whoever gave you that data on. The second thing I want to say is that you guys in logistics, in packaging, etc., are actually really, really lucky, because you don't have data that's as sensitive as people who have to deal with finance data or health data. And remember, in Norway, we managed to build Altinn, which actually deals with very, very individually sensitive finance data. So when we want to do it, we can do it, right? So remember, data is to be used, and you need to understand you have green data and red data, and focus working on green data first. And I can talk about synthetic data and quality of data for hours, but I see the numbers are getting red again.
Yeah, we don't really have that time. But one final question, and it's more a practical advice. I mean, I think most of us are, in the beginning of how to use AI in a businesses. So what's your take on this? What's your recommendation? Where to start?
I want to say two things again. One thing is we all need to go on lifelong learning. And we talked about lifelong learning for years. We haven't done anything. I mean, all the LMSs around me, I see, have either a couple of podcasts by really, really brilliant people like Trygve, but they are, for IT guys, or they have HMS stuff for the rest of the world. So everybody needs to learn, and we need to teach people in ways that everybody can understand. So I talk about AI hamburger. The meat is the IT team, but it's not the IT guys that have the monopoly on where to go with AI. The top of the hamburger is the leadership and the board, and they need to get a move on AI direction and budgets. And the bottom of the hamburger is the rest of the organization, and they need to be helped to say, this is what I want AI to do for me. Not IT, but OT. And I think together, we can define some amazing world-leading solutions, but we need to open it up to everybody. It needs to get out of IT.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Silvija, for this mind-blowing presentation. And as I said in the beginning, this will open up a lot of questions for all of us, I assume. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
So now let's continue and end up with our final speaker today. It's Trygve Refvem, and you will guide us through a more practical approach of AI and how we can use new technologies in the daily business. Trygve, as I understand, you are an experienced leader. You have been working over 2 decades within IT and the tech and the media industry. And today you are heading an innovation team at Skatteetaten, which is the Norwegian tax authorities. What else? You have a lot of experience from the media industry, so you are a kind of professional within the more practical part of how to use AI and new tech. So very welcome, Trygve.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And fantastic, Silvija, you're always great and inspire everyone. I think your last point is really crucial in this context. The fact that technology is now being extremely democratized. It's no longer a need for a mad scientist lab in the basement where all the techies are developing the future. This is the time where we all can play around with it. And I also really subscribe to the thought of lifelong learning, and I believe that's part of what I'm trying to do today. Basically, we'll be splitting this into 2 sections. One monologue where I'll be talking a little bit and showing some examples, and then we'll try some live demoing. And since we heard about the EU regulation on packaging, we'll be, of course, interacting with that content in ChatGPT. And then we'll see how much time we have and how many experiments we can do. So without further ado, I always refer back to Amra's law, and I think most people know this, at least subconsciously. We have a tendency towards overestimating the short-term impact and underestimating the long-term impact. And this is kind of evident by looking at investments and maybe even the NVIDIA share price. When a new product comes up, you can follow your local newspaper's headlines and see what is starting to hype. Now, that's also evident and shown better in Gartner's hype cycle curve. As we can see, the generative AI phenomena is now on its way down, which means simply that we are starting to underestimate. But the newspapers have stopped writing about it as much as they did. And new things are popping up. What we can expect over the next coming months is probably less content about ChatGPT and more content about the early part of the cycle, like human working robots. And I think that's one example given by Silvija earlier. Another example is this guy, Optimus, that Elon Musk has been developing. This is generation 2, and Elon Musk is saying any product needs to go through third generation to be market ready. And to be honest, I really have been sleeping. I didn't realize this was something that would happen in our time. This is, something you've seen on Star Wars, and the idea of having your own robot in your house, in this case making an omelet, is just mind-boggling to me. But even though he's overestimating his delivery times, he still say they estimate production of 1 million units in the next couple of years, and that this will be costing around $20,000, so should be less than a car, and the market is every human on planet should have one. So you can imagine what this will do with logistics and warehouse. If this is $20,000 and you can interact with it with natural language, and it can do delicate actions like picking up an egg, it can surely handle a pallet. At the other end of the spectrum, you have this generative AI, and Silvija have been talking about it a little bit. I'm going to be a bit more down to earth on practical examples, and this example is 2 phones with ChatGPT talking to each other in what's called the real-time API, which is advanced voice. What's significant about this is that the 2 are having an autonomous conversation, and they're doing it in a pace and rhythm that really resembles human interaction. So we'll see if the video starts with audio.
iPhone was delivered 2 days ago. Cool. Could you share the order number with me? Of course. It's 10293-849. Great, thanks. Is the device physically damaged in any way? No, there's no physical damage. It's just not turning on despite trying all the basic troubleshooting steps. Bummer. Would Joe prefer to return the iPhone to an Acme Telco store or ship it back? Shipping it back would be the best option. Could you please provide the shipping information and process to get a replacement? Absolutely. I'll email a shipping label and return instructions. Could you provide Joe's email address for me? Sure.
So, I mean, I think that's just pointing to what will happen in the future, and I do also believe that the people that are being replaced are the ones that don't know how to use AI. But there's also a small shift, or maybe a big one, in the 3D's dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs. And maybe this type of customer service falls in the dull category. I certainly believe that this will have a huge impact on customer service around the world. But to get to this, I really need to reiterate, the theory behind this. I'm not going to go deep into the technicals, but to be able to understand how these things works, this is a simple model. So, like Silvija also touched on, the model is pre-trained, and it's basically guessing the next word, or rather half a word. But let's keep it to a word. So the sentence so far is: this is the. One option is optimal, no. Finest, no. Best, yes. Food, no. Language model, yes. So this happens really fast, but the model itself is not knowledgeable as such. It defines what is the next statistically optimal word. So it's not, when it's hallucinating, or many feel that it's lying to you or making up stuff, it's just because it's statistically possible that this will be the right next word. Kind of, and the scary part is it's kind of similar to what I'm doing right now. Since I'm talking without the manuscript, my brain works in the same way, with my neurons firing and spitting out a new word. And that's kind of scary, and it's also interesting because I don't think anyone really knows what's going on in the brain on a deeper level than the neural net that this currently is built on. But okay, now that we know that, at the Norwegian Tax Administration, we are doing a bunch of experiments and pilots. One of them is on our call centers, right? Because I think most tax administrations have a problem with a lot of callers in a certain period of the year, and that creates a big queue, and some of them are sent to a voice message. So the way we do it at the tax admin is basically we have a team of great people doing the tech, but they don't have the great ideas. So we ask the business units to come up with problems, and then we can see if we can apply technology to the problem. And in this case, an elderly lady said, what if we could do something about these messages? Because currently they're just being, sent to a random operator who doesn't necessarily know anything about the topic at hand. So in this case, we're just taking the voice message, transcribing it. And today you can transcribe with Nasjonalbiblioteket in Norwegian. Nasjonalbiblioteket, it's Whisper model. That's a similar one for the other Nordic languages, and get a really accurate transcription. And that enables a large language model to understand the question, put it in the right queue, and potentially add a possible set of answers to the operator, thereby making his or her job a lot easier and more efficient. And of course, that can be applied to everything. That can be applied to emails, written letters, any kind of dialogue with our contact center. And since we are dealing with multiple, millions of calls, that can have a potentially large production increase for the public sector. Another example, which is probably even closer to what you guys are experiencing every day, and is related to the point of data being crucial for any AI system, is the fact that we have a lot of unstructured data, right? If I have a letter, that's an unstructured data source. How can I make that more structured? Because AI loves structured data even more than just data. So in this case, we created a small product where you can upload a document. In my example here, I'm uploading the passport of my daughter. That's just an image file. Then I ask the system to suggest what data fields are interesting in this source. So the system needs to understand the file, figure out what content is there, and then I'm asking it to suggest the data scheme to be able to extract the data and make it a structured document. Why is that important? Because we do ID control, right? So when you have a person at the counter at the tax administration doing, for example, work permits, they need to be able to verify the ID. So in this case, being able to extract structured data from unstructured sources is really helpful in the real world. Now, this could be a packaging slip. It could be a custom declaration documents, could be anything. That's the beauty of it. So, just to see the width of this, I just tried this out yesterday to upload an invoice to see what kind of fields you can pull out from an invoice, because that's such a different document than a passport. So in this case, I'm just selecting a PDF version of an invoice. Takes about 4 seconds to read the document, and then suggest a data scheme, and that's taken an additional 4.5 seconds to understand the content of the document. Then it suggests what would be interesting to pull out of this one, and then I can finally just pull the data out. Of course, that's not the end of the job, right? That's where you can start hooking it up to your systems, be it contracts. It could be work contracts, could be freight contracts, could be customs data, could be anything, right? The key thing here is, if this is one of the tasks that your auditing department is doing, or if this is something that is a manual process today, there's a huge potential for efficiency gains. All right. let's go to the good old ChatGPT. This, as Silvija said, if you have a paid account, you can create these assistants called GPTs. Creating a GPT 2-3 years ago would cost you, around 1 million kroner, right? If you wanted to make your own separate, AI agent, AI assistant, that would probably cost you around 1 million. Now it will take you about 1 minute, and it's free. So that's the level of change that we're looking at. So I'll share my screen for a second, because now we'll try the dangerous part of doing live experiments. Okay, so I knew our topic today was EU regulation on packaging. So I took the liberty of creating a small GPT. In this case, I gave it a name, EU regulation on packaging, gave it a description, helps in understanding the new regulation. And then I did this, instructions. Instructions are referred to as system prompts or prompts. And in this case, you basically write it as if you were writing instruction to a human coworker, right? Or at least something that could help him understand what job he is supposed to do. So in this case, you're an expert on the EU regulations, helping the customer and professional user to understand how to navigate and understand regulations. Okay, then I upload the EU regulation document that I found. Hopefully that's the correct one. And ask the system to create a logo for this. Okay? So now we can try it out to see whether it works. And then I noted a few questions. So if we start off by asking, what are the aims and intentions of the new regulation? It searches through the knowledge base, which is the document itself, and then starts writing, the summary. Now, of course, I could just stop this now and say, tell me as if I was 8 years. Okay. But it's starting to just rewrite it in a different manner. So let's see if we can drill more deeply into it. Let's say I want to know more about composite packaging, because I noted that from the earlier talk. Okay, so now I can learn more about that. Great. And what do they mean with harmonized labeling scheme? So this is for me a great way of interacting with content or complicated content, because I can ask the model or the AI to tell it to me in the way that I want them to tell it. So I could say, let's do let's say the classic, right? Make it a poem. Let's say that I was interested in that. So here we go. Here we have a short poem on the EU regulation on packaging. Now, of course, this is interacting with the document or knowledge base. That could be anything. It could be your user manual, could be your annual report. Could really be anything, but it's a new way of interacting and discussing with data. And of course, this also works in voice, so you can talk to it as well. So I wanted to do one more small example before we go back to the presentation, because you can also create code, right? When we say it's democratized, let's see the proof of that. So I'm asking this other, it's not ChatGPT, this is from Anthropic, called Claude. I'm asking you to make a small website about the EU packaging regulation. And it's on the work. And it should be done quite soon. And we can have a look at how it looks as a first glance. Okay, there we go. Here we have a new web page on the EU packaging regulation. So this means that, what did that take? 20 seconds? that's what it takes to create a new web page in 2024. Now, I'll be showing you hopefully a small example of how you can make another way of consuming this relatively hard content to read. Why not make a small podcast of it? And if you take note of the URL, here is Notebook LM, a new service from Google, where we can create a small podcast based on anything, any document you upload. It will automatically create English podcast with two people discussing your topic. So with that, I want to go back to the presentation, please. So, okay, how can we create an AI assistant? I think that's very simple. Yes, it does cost $20 a month to use ChatGPT, but that's a really easy first step into AI if you want to try it out. The other stuff I've shown takes a bit more effort, but I really hope you guys will start playing with it just to learn what it can and cannot do, and that will trigger your imaginations as to how you implement this in your business. Because there are a bunch of problems this technology can solve now, not in the future, but now. And with that, I think I'll just do let's say 20-second soundbite of the podcast on EU packaging.
Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how we love to really get our hands dirty here, so get ready, because we've got a mountain of a topic for you today, no pun intended.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the EU's updated rules on packaging waste, and it's some seriously heavy stuff.
Seriously, our listeners sent over some articles, and we were blown away by the numbers. Are you ready for this? In 2021 alone, the EU generated a massive 84.3 million tons of packaging waste.
84.3 million tons. Just let that...
All right, so you get the picture. This took about 5 minutes to create. I just uploaded the EU PDF document. No instructions, nothing at all, and 5 minutes later I have this podcast. It's a 20-minute podcast that teaches you about the new regulations. So to end my 20 minutes, I put together a small list of interesting tools that I recommend. Of course, check out the different language models. Google has one, Mistral has one, and ChatGPT, and the one I just shown, Claude, also fantastic, each good at its own. Suno if you want to create music. HeyGen if you want to create avatar, speaking avatar. 11 Labs to clone your voice, and then finally Notebook LM, where you can create podcasts from anything. And with that, thank you very much. Please feel free to continue the conversation by connecting. I'm always interested in talking AI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trygve. Wow, I think this was also very much mind-blowing, and you gave us a good of examples how we can use this in practice. So very interesting. One question that was raised, and it's more about your experience, because you have been working with this now for more than 2 decades, as I mentioned. And what has been the main challenge is when you have implemented this in the business workflow and the business daily work?
I think the main problems are regulatory, legal, security, and platforms. I mean, one thing is doing pilots and proof of work and value, but there are regulatory constraints, especially when it comes to data, and very much so in public sector, and especially so in tax administration. But there are regulatory concerns that you need to address so you don't really mess up. But you won't see it until you try it. That's the problem. So you can do 100 meetings, but you won't learn anything from it unless you start playing with it. So you really need to find a problematic area that is either dirty, dangerous, or dull, and then try something, see how it works, and then move along with that.
Yeah. And can you give us any examples where, I mean, AI or big data really have created true value in the businesses and in the organizations, based upon your experience?
Well, of course, for the tax administration, it's already in use, but that's traditional AI in machine learning. to find what people to check or double check. I believe the biggest value creation is in the back office functions, simply because it takes 5 times more to write than to read. And if you can use an AI to write, that's 5x saved. So obviously we have a huge, we have 2,500 people working in customer service, taking the phones and answering emails. That's obviously somewhere we can really improve by using this.
Good. And one other question that was actually raised here, and of course, lots of the participants today, we are working in big companies, small companies, and some of us, for some of us, this is really new things. And what's your take on, where actually to start? If you are a company today that you haven't touched the AI, and you introduced us to a completely new world, what it actually can do. So what's your suggestions? Where to start?
I basically asked the question to the organization, and I did this at the tax administration. Basically, do a introduction to what it is, make it less dangerous, make it easy and allowed to try out things. And when you have that, then you ask them. I simply ask you at the tax admin, if I could give you a human assistant, what should that person be doing? And that's more or less what you can do with AI today. So if you ask the organization, and don't ask them for great AI ideas because no one will have that, but ask them what the human assistants could do for them. And that's where you have the first potential AI cases.
So what you basically are suggesting then is that we start, using ChatGPT, for instance, before we start up huge AI projects. So let's start with the daily work as humans and employees.
Absolutely. I think if you get some training in how you actually interact with AI in 2024-25, then you're much better suited to be able to define an AI project.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend learn it by playing with it, but don't spend too much time playing around. Once you see the potential, start looking for the use cases, and then move on development.
Sounds really good, and of course you gave us a good example today how we can summarize these 330 pages from the EU regulation. So that's a good example what it actually can do in practice. So thank you very much for that. So all in all, thanks Trygve, and thanks to all of you speakers. I think this has been very interesting. So thank you very much. So that was it. I do hope we all have got a flavor of what the future will bring to us. And the reason why we, wanted to exercise this seminar or this webinar was actually to look into the future. And it's for sure that there will be a lot of changes going forward. And today, we have heard about 2 driving forces, the EU regulations and what AI new tech can do. And I think we are all convinced after those 3 good speakers that it will impact all of us, either we want it or not. So it will be a true game changer. And the purpose of this seminar was actually to give all of us a flavor of what's coming. I know that none of us have the answers, but I think we actually are very thrilled to take on this new future and what it can bring to our industry. So thank you very much once again that you participated into this webinar, and don't hesitate to contact any of us in the future. Smart Retur, we are working with this. We are not in the forefront. We are touching it, but we are very interesting to dive deeper into these areas. So don't hesitate to contact any of us if you want to continue a dialogue or whatever. So thank you very much once again.